guys, I'm just stopping in real quick to tell you there is a trigger warning. We do talk about sexual assault in this first part of this, so if that bothers you, if you've been through it and you just can't really listen to it. We don't go into a lot of detail right here, but we do go into it a little bit, and I would just much rather give you a heads up. If you need to, please go choose another video to watch. I completely understand, and I'll see you in the next one, okay? Bye. Hey guys, it's ayebeepee and welcome back to my channel. I have my bachelor's degree in criminal justice and a minor in psychology, and I'm going to say that for the next 75 videos because I'm just so proud of myself. On top of that, I am a board member for a nonprofit called Voices for the Silenced, and we help with missing person cases and getting their name out there, keeping it out there, doing searches, social media presence, and just any type of resources for loved ones of the missing to really make anything easier on them as we can. Welcome back to the Crimetober series, and today we are going to be talking about the Rogers family. Now, this is a lot. There's a lot to this case, so I am breaking this up in two parts, so make sure to come back to see part 2. But let's just get right in. Hal Rogers was very introverted, shy, quiet, and reserved. He is the husband in this family, and he was 36 at the time of all this happening. He was a very hard worker, and he ended up inheriting his farm from his family that him and his brother John Rogers lived on. It was 300 acres, and it was 3 miles outside of the town Wilshire in Ohio, and they both just put a trailer on the property for them to live in. They ended up getting about 80 cows and made it a dairy farm. Now, John was thought to be strange, but for the most part he kind of kept to himself over in his trailer, and he did do things that were out of the ordinary, like wearing army fatigues even though he's never been in the army. He would say he did some secret tours for the Secret Service, but I gotta be honest, nobody really believed him. And Joan was the wife. She liked to go by Joe, and she was also 36 at the time. Now, she was beautiful, hazel eyes, brown hair, thin, and a very kind smile. She was also a very hard worker, but she was the complete opposite of Hal. She was outgoing, very sweet. She could make friends anywhere. She had a girly side and was just very charismatic and adventurous. She loved country music and dancing, but she grew up in a very strict household. It was very religious. Hal and Joe started dating in high school, and she would make Hal dance with her, make him listen to the country music she liked, and they got married right after graduation in 1971. Joe was pregnant at this time, so they just kind of had no choice but to go ahead and start their family. And of course, Joe's parents weren't not happy with the fact that she was pregnant during her wedding, but I think the bridge did seem to mend later on. Now, the town Wilshire is near the Indiana and Ohio border, and it's a very small town. There's 400 people there, and it was a very tight-knit community. And like I said, it wasn't big. There was a library, a post office, an antique store, a few small restaurants, a park, and a church. And like I said, the whole family worked really hard. Even once they had kids, they all contributed to this dairy farm because farming is a lot of work. They had to take care of these cows every day, but Joe also got a job to work midnight at a place called Peyton's Northern. She got this job so the family could have health insurance and just a little extra money for a cushion. But it was really, really hard on Joe because she would help all day with the farm, do the things that the girls needed done, and then end up going and working midnights. She would end up only being able to take naps throughout the day and never really got a good solid 8 hours sleep. But Jo was a very active mother, and she was not going to take that away from the girls. She would take them to cheerleading practices, 4-H meetings, contests, just anything the girls needed to go to. Now, their daughter Michelle that she was pregnant with was born on February 22nd, 1972. She looked just like her mom, but she acted just like her dad. She did look fairly young for her age, but also when she got dressed up, she looked way too old for her age. So there was never really a happy medium with her. She was more of a tomboy, but she loved those animals on the farm. She would groom the cows, feed the cows, take them on walks, and she was said to be an average student, but her teachers did say that she could probably excel way more than she did if she quit flirting and talking to all the boys and girls in the back of the classroom. She was a little bit of a rebel. She liked partying. She liked drinking beer and hanging out with her friends late at night. She smoked cigarettes, and she really hung out with almost all the boys from her 4-H program. She did have a reputation of sleeping around, but that does seem to just be a rumor from my research. She did have a boyfriend named Jeff Feesby, and they had known each other since the 7th grade, but they really hadn't been a couple long. Hal and Michelle were so much alike and so reserved that neither of them really ever got to know each other pretty well at all. Now, she was fairly close to her mom, but her and Hal just did not have that father-daughter relationship. Michelle wanted to leave the small town. She wanted to go to college and have a college life and just live like all the other kids growing up around her. But she knew the Rogers did not have the money to send her to college, so she was aware that she might have had to stay at her hometown, and her future was her farm. And now Michelle had a sister also named Christy. She was born October 6, 1974, and she was 14 at the time. She looked just like Hal, but she acted just like Jo, so she was very outgoing and fun and wanted to be the center of attention. Now, she was only 5'1", so she would tease her hair just huge and tall to make it seem like she was bigger, because it was her insecurity. She was just always happy, and she made friends so well, and she also loved these animals so much. She would practice her cheers in front of the cows and just ended up naming all of them. She was very popular in school. Like I said, she was a cheerleader, and she was also a catcher in softball. Now, she was a daddy's girl. Her and Hal were inseparable. When she was little, she would go watch him do his chores and just sit on a blanket and play on her toys, but it didn't take her long to want to go out there with her dad. And like I said, all this working that Jo was doing was really, really hard on her. She got extremely thin, very pale, and she looked like she was about 15 years older than she actually was. She had almost permanent dark circles under her eyes, and something at some point had to give for Jo. There was a reason that people think that Michelle was so reserved, especially pulling away and starting to party as much as she was, and that just really wasn't any type of personality trait that her family had. So it was kind of clear that she was probably going through something, and boy were we right. So there was a day that John Rogers and his girlfriend ended up breaking up. Now, they couldn't afford to live apart right now, so they ended up just kind of being roommates, which, let's be honest, is a horrible idea. But she ended up coming home one evening, and she got attacked right outside the trailer. Someone handcuffed her and blindfolded her and threatened her with a knife if she didn't stop crying. But she recognized that voice, and that voice was John Rogers. He did end up taking her into the trailer and her and filming it. She ended up calling the police and reporting John and told them, go in that trailer and the proof is right there. He filmed this happen. So the police ended up getting a warrant for his trailer. So the police show up and they do end up finding the videotape of his girlfriend, but they also found pictures of a teenage girl bound, naked, and blindfolded. And they also found audio of whoever this was just screaming and begging for this person to stop doing whatever they were doing and just begging to be left alone. And so when they ended up identifying the person in these pictures, it was Michelle. And it turned out he had been her since she was 14 years old, which is kind of right around when she started experimenting with partying. He was arrested for the of his ex-girlfriend. They didn't really see a point in putting Michelle through a trial because she just downright refused to testify. She was scared to death. Now, when Hal and Joe found this out, it destroyed them. I mean, clearly, right? They just couldn't figure out how they didn't know, how they missed it. Was there any signs? They just could not figure this out. And Hal, of course, took it the hardest. He would go to his brother's trailer and lock himself in there for hours. He was just so eaten up with guilt and depression from just having no idea that his daughter was going through this and he couldn't help her. But Michelle told him that John told her that he was going to kill her if she said a word to anybody, so she was really scared to come forward. And Hal's mother, Irene, took John's side. She ended up telling the whole town that Michelle lied about this, her granddaughter. And Hal ended up cutting his mom off completely. So now, at this point, as you can tell, things have gotten absolutely high stress for the Rogers. They ended up wanting to go on vacation just to have a new mindset, right? And they decided they wanted to go to Florida. They wanted to see Disney World and SeaWorld, the beaches, all of it. They wanted the whole experience. They wanted to go for about a week and they just had to get away from the whole town knowing what happened to Michelle, it being her uncle, and like I said, Joe needed a break. She needed it. Well, it did hit them fairly soon that the person that could help on the farm while they were gone was now arrested and had been harming their daughter for years. So Hal, being the good man he is, told his family, I'll stay back. I'll do all the farm stuff. You three go have a trip. So Joe, Michelle, and Christy went on their way. On May 26, 1989, at about 1 p.m., they ended up leaving. Michelle did sit up front with her mom to help guide on the map, and Christy sat in the back. And at around 8 p.m., we know that they stopped at a Best Western in Dalton, Georgia. They did end up getting some salt and pepper shakers from this gift shop there, and the girls ended up going to bed. On May 27th, 1989, they woke up early to go ahead and get to Florida, and their first stop was the Jacksonville Zoo. And after they had a blast at the zoo, they did end up going and checking into their hotel, which was a Days Inn. On May 28th, they did end up driving to Ocala, where they went to the Silver Springs State Park. And then they did end up going to the Quality Inn near the Kennedy Space Center to stay for that night. Now on May 29th, they ended up making it to Orlando. They went to SeaWorld and they ended up planning their few days in Disney. And they ended up staying in a Gateway Inn. Joe did write a postcard this day to Hal at some point that explained that she was absolutely exhausted. The girls were dragging her everywhere, but she was really happy and having a great time. And now Michelle also wrote a postcard to her boyfriend Jeff that she just pretty much explained everything they had did so far. On May 30th, they did end up going to Magic Kingdom, and on the 31st, they did make it to Epcot. And so on June 1st, around 9 a.m., they ended up leaving to go closer to Tampa to go to Busch Gardens. Now Joe did end up getting lost. They think she took the exit before she needed to or after, I'm not really sure, but either way, the wrong exit. exit. And because they got so turned around, they did end up deciding they were going to stay another night. Now, while they were trying to find their hotel, a man did end up coming up to them and giving them directions to a day's inn. And he ended up writing it on like a Clearwater Beach brochure. And he did offer to meet them again because he did these really cool like sunset cruises, he said. And it did make the sisters really want to do it. Michelle and Christy were all about it. Now, Jo was a little hesitant, but her daughters wanted to so bad, so why not? Now, at 12:30, they did end up checking into this day's inn, and Michelle ended up calling her boyfriend around this time. Someone from that hotel room did end up calling Busch Gardens also. Now, around 7:30, the girls did end up going to the restaurant in the hotel, and someone did say that Michelle ended up smiling and waving at them because they were kind of looking at each other, and it was kind of like that awkward thing of what do you do? But the girls seemed perfectly happy and normal. They ended up going back to their room and taking pictures because they had taken disposable cameras with them this whole trip and just filling them up so they can develop the film and remember their whole trip. And at about 8:30 or 9, it's thought that they got to the boat ramp. And they absolutely ended up getting on the boat with this guy. So that was June 1st, right? June 8th, the housekeeper ended up going into their room 251 and said it looked like the beds were never messed with. Now, they did say that it looked like someone just kind of came in and dropped all their stuff off because things were scattered everywhere. It was clear someone had been in there because suitcases and all of that. The souvenirs from the trip were in there, things like that. But the beds just did not look slept in, and they haven't came to clean this whole time. So what happened? So the hotel manager felt the need to call the police and report who checked into this room, which was Jo Rogers and Michelle and Christy. And they also gave the police her car information from the parking pass. The police did end up coming in here and searching the whole room and seeing exactly what I described also. And around this time, this is when Hal started freaking out. So he had kind of convinced himself that maybe they just decided to stay an extra few days and they couldn't figure out how to get a hold of him and things like that. So he tried not to panic the first few days they were gone. And then he really laser beam focused on the farm so he wouldn't worry. Next thing you know, a week has went by. So he started calling friends and family asking if they heard from the girls, and nobody had. So he ended up calling the police to see if there had been any wrecks around here, and there hadn't been. And this was the moment that Hal decided he needed to report his girls missing. But what Hal did not know, and what the hotel did not know, was that on June 4th, 1989, a group of people were sailboating in the Tampa Bay, and they ran up on a body under the Sunshine Skyway. They ended up contacting the Coast Guard, and it was really hard to pull this body out of the water because there was a rope tied to a cement block that was tied to this person's neck. They did have to end up cutting the rope because they just could not get this body out. I'm not sure if the cement block was kind of stuck on something or whether it was just that heavy, but it had long brown wavy hair, wearing a black t-shirt, and they ended up having to put this person obviously in a body bag because there was no way this person was alive. Well, then they get a call around St. Petersburg Pier of another body, and this body also had long wavy brown hair. She was also wearing a black shirt but had a blue bikini top underneath. But while they were coming to retrieve this body, another body was also discovered. This one was found 200 feet from the second, and this one had medium length sandy blonde hair and a peach colored top. All three were found floating face down. Their mouths were covered in duct tape, and they were also bound with duct tape at their wrists and ankles, with their arms behind their back. They were all naked from the waist down, and there was clearly no IDs on them, and they all had the rope with a concrete block tied around their neck. The bodies had floated even with the concrete block because of the heat of the ocean. It was just so hot that it caused the bodies to bloat so much that a 30-pound concrete block could not sink them. The autopsy states that it is thought that they had been in the water between 50 to 60 hours at this point. And like I said, the high temperatures of not only outside, it being summer in Florida, but the heat of the water caused them to decompose a lot faster. They all three had water in their lungs, which means that they entered the ocean alive. And due to the decomposition, they couldn't get evidence proof, but because they were naked from the waist down, it was most likely that they were assaulted. But Michelle had ended up freeing one of her hands from the duct tape, but I can't imagine how fast they sank with the concrete block on them, so unfortunately it didn't help her any. Now, marine professionals at the University of South Florida started to study the current trends around this time period, and due to this, it is thought that they were thrown from a boat. There's no way that they had been put in the water by the shore, and they did think that these people were probably in the water between 2 to 5 days. And the Rogers car was found at the boat ramp. This boat dock was about 2 miles from their hotel, and in the car was a map, the Uno card game, a puzzle, and they had found a Clearwater Beach brochure that had the directions to the Days Inn on it. And this brochure looked like it had a palm print, and there were 2 different handwritings on it, and one of these handwritings did not match Joe or the girls, and it proved someone knew they were staying at the Days Inn. And they tested every single worker's handwriting around this Days Inn and at the Days Inn, and it didn't match any of those either. Now, they also found another piece of paper that was like a Days Inn stationery that also had writing on it, and it was the directions to the boat dock, and it said something along the lines of blue and white, which people assumed had to be the colors of whatever boat they were looking for. And this handwriting did match Joe's, along with the other handwriting on the brochure. Now, after a week, they were able to officially identify Joe, Michelle, and Christy as these bodies. Somehow they could test it from fingerprints, but they also confirmed it with dental records because Hal had gotten them for the police. Now, the police did end up contacting Hal to tell them that these were the girls, and he did seem worried about them, but he didn't really seem as worried as people would have wanted him to be, I guess. But who knows? Maybe he just doesn't show it. He was reserved, quiet, shy. He probably wasn't going around freaking out because he was so worried about his girls. That's just not how Hal was. And he explained the farm was so much work, and especially when it was 4 people usually running it, actually 5 people usually running it because of John, down to 1 person. It was really hard to lose track of the days and time trying to get everything done because you couldn't just not take care of your animals. So the police just kind of chalked it up to maybe people just grieve differently, and he is right. Everybody that used to help him is gone. So they did take that into consideration, but it's not like they didn't take their eye off of Hal. And the last thing we're going to go over in this one is the funeral. I felt this was a good place to end, and then we'll go right into the investigation in the next one. On June 13th, 1989, the girls did end up having their funeral. Hal asked for a teddy bear to be placed in each casket with them, and they were buried at the Zion Lutheran Cemetery in their hometown. Around 300 family and friends came to support Hal in this and share their grief with him, and they had multiple officers there to make sure the media did not come near them during this time period and let them grieve in peace, because this story was becoming huge. And like I said, we are going to stop right here because we still have so much to cover, and this part's really deep. So we need to have 2 parts just to be able to digest this a little better. But thank you guys so much for watching, and thanks for being patient with me on having a second part to this. I really just feel like it's better for everyone this way. And thank you guys so much for watching. Like and subscribe for me, and hit that notification button. That way you're notified the next time I upload. Now don't forget, there is a GoFundMe for Crystal Young. If you have not seen my video for her, please go back and watch it. It's actually hit 1,000 views, so I'm pretty excited about that. But her mom needs this PI, so go figure out why by watching that video. Also, I still have stickers for sale. They're $2 each, and all proceeds go to the Cold Case Foundation, so it is for a good cause. And thank you guys again so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!